Hey guys, and welcome back again to me, Ben, playing Cities Skylines today in my city of Springvalley. Today I want to give it a try and actually, try out a new kind of gameplay or at least video version or modification here. So I'm still going to play about an hour and a half in a row, depending on how much I would like to get done today. With one major difference, and this is like I'm more or less recording everything with commenting on it instead of just recording things and then doing the voiceovers afterwards. So it's completely, a whole completely new process for me, to be honest. But I wanted to give it a try, and I also want to focus on the gameplay more and more instead of always commenting things that I'm currently doing and where my mouse is going left and right. So maybe it's going to be more interesting for you, or at least I hope so. So first things first, I will begin with modifying my train station, or at least the tracks layout. I've just recently seen a couple of things on YouTube that I actually liked very much, and obviously, again, Ray, thank you for the hint here. You're absolutely right. I'm missing like commuter train stations or train stations for my citizens to travel from the suburbs to downtown and whatnot. So I have to modify a couple of things, and I want to do it in a sufficient way because obviously I want to create something more beautiful, and maybe that also increases a bit like my gameplay style in the end. So without any further ado, I'm going to get started, and I would like to thank you first for joining me again here on my YouTube channel. I hope to be able to grow it up to 1,000 subscribers actually until the 24th of October when Cities Skylines 2 starts, because from then on I will completely focus on Cities Skylines 2 most likely, because I'm so excited about this new game coming up. I've seen a lot of features and all the developer videos and the previews that they're sharing since a couple of weeks. And this makes me really curious about the new game, and I think it will also require a completely new type of gameplay or playing style that I obviously didn't purpose so far, and maybe nobody has really done that, because there are so many more options and many more things to take into consideration, like groundwater, the depletion of groundwater, the pollution of groundwater, and things like that. So it's going to be more interesting and more challenging overall. But enough is enough. If you haven't subscribed yet to my channel, I would appreciate if you did so. And if you like my video, please leave me a comment, please leave me a like on this video, because obviously it keeps me going and it keeps my channel growing. So I would appreciate that very, very much indeed. So have fun, and I'll be there for you as soon as I need to tell you something about what I'm actually doing. So have a good day and enjoy the time. So the first step I have to do is I'm deleting my arterial road here just to make sure that I can lay out the train tracks accordingly. And I'm also deleting the tunnel entrances of the existing train tracks, making sure that I have none of the existing structure left, because I want to make sure that I'm leading those tracks above ground but still below the highway in the next couple of for the future, I would say, because I wanted to make sure that it's easier to understand where those tracks are going to and how they are contributing to the city traffic or the incoming train connections. So I'm starting here with laying out 7 units down and 6 meters down in height, so that I can create a nice slope beginning from the exit of the train station, the main train station that I have in Spring Valley. And I want to bring this down to -12 here, just to have enough headroom for future developments here. I'm also merging a couple of those train tracks because currently I don't need 6 of them. I only need 4, and even 4 is still a bit too much based on what I actually need for my city. But that way I still have room to grow. And further on, I'm expanding these 4 lines closer to the park. Obviously, the pathways for my citizens have to go for now. As you can see throughout the video, it's a bit challenging for me because this is the first attempt of me laying train tracks underneath existing structures, but I figured that this might be the best approach. And right there, I'm choosing a very steep slope here, very tight curve to connect to my existing train connections in the east and the west. But that's something that needs to be changed later on. Making those minor modifications wouldn't be possible without the Move It mod, to be honest, because otherwise I think with the vanilla version of Cities Skylines 1 you would actually be stuck in getting weird connections overall. And right now building the bridges properly is also something that made the whole process way easier for me, having those train tracks underneath the highway. And this is also only just possible because I'm using the Anarchy mod here, which allows me to lay tracks underneath existing structures, because otherwise the game obviously would create weird connections here and there. And here I'm just smoothing out the terrain next to the train tracks to make it look more realistic and more seamless. There I had a bit of a challenge to create these overpaths for my 2-lane highway. And the reason why this happened actually is because I was using the bridge mode, which didn't really help. So I went back to the standard mode and was able to connect the 2-lane highway from one end to the other quite more or less easily. And what you can see here is a couple of attempts of me trying to connect the different train tracks together, because I wanted to make sure that trains can switch train tracks whenever they approach the main station, because you never know in which direction a train might want or need to leave for a different destination. So I wanted to make sure that this works, but due to the fact that I sloped it I think this weird occurrence that you can see here from a landscaping perspective actually occurred, and for that reason I had to redo it again and add those intersections or lane switching, track switching options in a different way to make them work. I think, by the way, this would still be operable for the trains, so the game would still work like that, but obviously it doesn't look that well at all, so I changed it. And even using the landscaping tool, by the way, didn't help. But as you can see, as soon as I had a leveled ground or soil underneath, it wasn't that much of a problem after all. Creating those pedestrian overpasses over the huge amount of train tracks wasn't that easy. And again, it's all like coming or boiling down to settings that I missed, making the wrong steps here, and not following a very distinct process. As you can see, the left connection here didn't really work properly, so I had to redo it again and again until I figured that deleting the existing path on the left actually makes things work a lot better. And not using the bridges, by the way, because they seem to create weird things at the very beginning, at least for paths. And then I also used, in that case, I used the correct pathing. But when we talk about the underpath that you will see later on, I used the wrong path at the very beginning before I actually realized that I needed to use a different path here. Due to the fact that I completely missed laying out the arterial avenue here in the first place, I thought I needed to expand my park area significantly to make sure that I can add in new side gates. But obviously that wasn't the case, and I figured it out later. So as mentioned, this park expansion, or the expansion of the park district, is actually not needed. But I only realized that later, that I was just missing the arterial connection from west to east. There the arterial connection comes, but obviously I missed the point to add in another node before, on the right side of it, because as you can see, the park entrance doesn't connect up because it's a bridge, and the bridge goes to the crossing directly instead of starting at the edge of the landscape. And this is only possible and doable with the node controller mod. And I have literally no idea why I switched that to ground mode. Honestly, that was not what I intended to do. I have to fix this in my next build, I think, or at least in the next episode. And that's the issue with the pathways for my citizens, where I was telling you I was using, and you can see me choosing that right away, like the wrong path, because it's a decorated path and this obviously doesn't allow underground paths. So before I realized that taking the standard vanilla pathway would be the best choice, it took me actually quite a bit to figure it out. There we finally go. And getting that train tracks underneath the highway intersection, that was quite a bit challenging, because first I thought this would work out, but it created another tunnel for me, which is something I didn't want to see in this build here. So obviously I had to delete it again, rework it, and yeah, also delete parts of the highway intersection here, just to make sure that I can recreate it and create another bridge-like thing for the overpass over those train tracks here. Now, one step forward, I'm approaching the stadium, the baseball stadium here, laying out the tracks underneath the pathway again, just to make sure to connect those up to the existing train station. In this first attempt, I was actually laying out the train tracks way too close to the stadium. I had to move that at a later stage, and you will see it, because I wasn't aware that the pathway for my citizens actually is attached right to the stadium here. So I moved it again a little bit further out, just to make sure that I get a nice overpass for my citizens. And I'm just adjusting the height of the bridge by modifying this little node in between, in the middle of the bridge, so that it's kind of leveled across the gap over the train tracks. Now I'm smoothing things out a little bit, just to make it more reasonable and to make it more beautiful here. And after doing that, I will continue building out some quays alongside the train tracks, because it makes it look even better overall. Now I'm leveling out some of the highway on-ramps and off-ramps. Now it's decorating time here, just to make sure that things look a little bit more beautiful next to my baseball stadium. I'm using some of the included props with the vanilla Cities Skylines, meaning some greater stones and rocks. But I'll also use some of the available Kai structures to make sure that the slopes and the edges to the train tracks look more natural, more like a planned solution. And without using one of the other mods available in the Steam Workshop, I wouldn't be able to put in some kais here alongside the slope of the terrain, because that's only possible when you use this mod. Otherwise it would only work close to a river or shore. Now it's all about adjusting the height of the different nodes to make sure that the kai isn't above any street or pathway. So I had to level the stadium just a bit to make sure that it fits better and more nicely into the landscape. Now again, it was about adjusting the pathway so that I could connect it properly to the stadium path that's going out of the property. Now I'm trying to snug it in neat and nicely. Still, that pedestrian overpass looked a little bit odd with the huge slope, so I adjusted that as well on a more reasonable level, and that way I was able to get across the quay. Here I was searching for a few more stone props, but unfortunately the standard ones that are included in the vanilla gameplay weren't enough or sufficient. So I gave up on that idea and added a few more trees right between the stadium, the train station and the upcoming avenue, now in the northern part, originally in the eastern part of the stadium. Here I'm adding in more quays to the side of the highways on both ends actually, and connect those up to the existing quays that are already in there. Adjusting the height of the quay alongside the train tracks to make it more reasonable. And here I'm checking the underground connections to the existing train lines, because I obviously wanted to make sure that I'm not missing out any opportunities here. And the other thing I realized here is that I lost another connection to one of my underground paths. They actually do seem to be a bit more unreasonable now, since we have this train line going underneath the highway, so I have to think about that, whether I find a different solution or something else instead of those underpasses, because obviously it would be a very, very steep slope for my citizens to actually be able to cross from one highway or from one end of the town to the next. Since I wanted to add in a few more train stations in this episode, I'm actually adding in another one here, just to make sure that I have some additional options for passengers to get on and off trains. And I have to think about, because I think I still need some kind of inner city train network, because currently I only have trains from the outside coming in, but not any kind of train lines coming or going across town. But I think with 2 train stations, or 3 in total right now, it's not yet reasonable to do that. Maybe, and that's something I'm just thinking about, maybe I'll lead those tracks above ground instead of below ground, as a kind of another subdivision between those slightly populated areas in Barlow district to the more densely populated parts of my town. So maybe it's actually a good idea to include another visible above ground train network here. I wanted to make sure that I follow the same pattern that I used previously at the beginning of my episode here, where I have lower train tracks going underneath a highway. Now I have to delete parts of my highway again to build a nicer or more beautiful overpath here. Again, this as a quick reminder to myself. First, lay down the road network, then start placing your train station. Otherwise, it won't work. It would look ugly. And you won't be able to figure out the direction and everything. I'm using the smooth slope tool here to make things a bit more reasonable from a landscaping perspective. Now I had to get my power connection over there, which is, by the way, something I didn't want to do beforehand. But there was no way around that, since I started laying out a new district of my town with that train station instead of building up the residential zones and commercial and office zones first. But you'll see that happening at a later stage in a couple of minutes. This so much reminds me of Japanese train stations or central stations that are located in smaller cities and towns. And you will see in a bit why I mean that. The way I set it up, like this is not or wouldn't be unusual for any Japanese bigger city or town, to have a train station right at the center before all the commercial zones are started. But you'll see it in a minute what I mean. I'll give you more explanation around that. It's time for a quick traffic fix. As you can see, this bridge is causing trucks and cars having to wait due to the fact that there is another pedestrian crosswalk included there, which is kind of strange, but yeah, it's I think dependent on the game mechanics. So I'll fix that soon, and I'll also fix the off-ramp off of this highway in a bit so that the trucks and cars flow more nicely. And there you can get a wonderful view of a train passing down the highway And all those bridges, it looks really way better, way more beautiful than it did before, at least in my opinion. And I like to incorporate things like that even more in the future into Spring Valley. That connection still looks a bit odd, but at least trains are getting to that station and going along. See what happened to the train. So I figured that there must be some kind of mistake with the height of the tracks here. And I was lowering the endpoint here significantly. But that slope, as you can see, it would be way too steep, which is the reason why I'm bringing it back up again. Now the trains seem to kind of wobble and bobble around, which looks very unreasonable. So I'm trying to get that fixed by lowering the train station, which actually turned out pretty well. First, I'm laying down the grid. I'm upgrading the existing roads with some avenues here with trees on both sides, and I'll connect those up to the existing road network. Move the train station ever so slightly to make sure that it's properly connected and that it doesn't look too off. And this is going to be a difficult crossing here. I'm curious how this develops over the next couple of episodes. And since I was worrying a little bit more about this, I actually moved my road further out alongside the tracks and connected it later on to the connector here to the avenue, just to be sure that I'm not causing any bad influence on my traffic in my city. One fun fact here, the more I play Cities Skylines, the more flexible I get with my layout. As you can see, it becomes more and more kind of a natural developed city over time. When I first started out laying down the initial grids of town, I was very much focused on using the ideal space or all the space available, but right now I'm getting more flexible and including curves and other elements of my city layout here. There are a couple of favorite parts in town that I actually absolutely love from a design perspective, but I'll give you a preview of that in one of my next episodes. So right now I'm just trying to figure out what to do next. As you can see, I'm usually not planning on what I'm doing in my episodes. So I'm moving things ever so slightly around to make it more reasonable, just to make it a bit more beautiful and more realistic over time. So I'm leveling out things here ever so slightly to make it look more beautiful, more reasonable along the way. Also, upgrading those avenues absolutely makes sense because I have a lot of traffic coming from this more or less densely populated district down below to my business district, which is the reason why I'm now including also 6-lane avenues here, just to make sure that I can cope with all the traffic that's coming along. Now it's about time to create this new district setup. First by adjusting some of the crossings here and their settings to make them look more beautiful and to let the traffic flow more nicely. Usually whenever I'm incorporating such huge changes to my city and the road network, as I did previously, I'm checking in and making sure by letting the game run for quite a bit. I'm checking in to make sure that everything functions and works properly as intended. And right now I'm checking in on the train station because I was worrying at that point in time whether the trains actually stop on this station, but I figured that they do just a little bit later. And I was, as you can see, worried about the initial connection from the upcoming tracks to the station, but I figured that this shouldn't be any kind of problem after all. I'm also doing the same thing with the other side of the train station just to be sure and to be on the safe side. And now it's time to start laying down the first couple of houses and here I'm beginning with commercial zones first, high density, and then getting down to low density and finally into office zones and then higher density residential zones, and later on onto low density residential zones. But of course, as you can see, a couple of roads were missing along the way, so this is also the reason why I'm putting down a couple of more roads in between the currently empty districts here, or blocks. I think you would call the blocks most likely. And as you can see, I'm trying to use as much of the available space as possible because I want it to be as dense as possible in the end. And next step, of course, is setting up the water lines accordingly. I'm always following the road network, at least I'm trying to. Sometimes I'm forgetting about changing it whenever I'm changing the road layout ever so slightly. But in that case, since it's a new district, a new block here, it's gonna be fine, or at least it should be fine. And you can see how quickly the dense residential zones are getting their first couple of buildings, which tells me, that there is, even if it's not a significant amount, but there is some kind of demand for new residential buildings here. Now I'm leaving one square empty to make sure to be able to add in some city services. And the overall attraction of my city currently isn't the best one, but I think I need to add in more office zones over the time just to be sure to be attractive enough for new residents. But at least from my experience, that step from 75k citizens up to 85 to 100k citizens is something that takes a while, and the better you plan it, the better it will turn out in the end, at least based on my experience so far. So I'm adding in fire station, police station, hospital of course, and also some schools, and one college, but no university, because they all should have access to the central university in town. It's always nice to see such a district grow that rapidly, and I'm now about to show you one of my favorite views here. Like you can see how much it looks like maybe smaller Japanese city or town around its central station. And things turn out to be even better after a little bit. And to create a natural sound barrier here, I'm adding in some more trees between the train tracks, just to make sure that not too much of the sound is actually getting through to my office and commercial zones and also the residential zones, because that usually impacts the likeliness of people to move in, especially if they have better locations that are less noisy. Yeah, but who wouldn't do that? So I completely get it. And what's always usually quite noisy are the on and off ramps of highways. So that's another thing I'm going to take care of, just to make sure that I'm not missing out any sound barrier opportunities here. And as you can see, most of the office zones and also commercial buildings, they are upgrading immediately after the sound barriers. And now the first residential zones, low density residential zones, are already moving in and being created. Now I'm adding in a few more office zones because people, they actually need it, including commercial zones, but I want to focus less on commercial instead of office, because commercial is usually quite noisy. Just the reason why I'm not adding too many of those into that little part of my town. So I think that's about it for today's episode. So I did incorporated a couple of changes regarding my train lines. I do have a new train station here, which is not yet sure whether it's fully functioning. It's something I'm curious about to see in the hopefully in the near future. There a train comes up, so that's good. One passenger train bringing people in from the outskirts of my city, or at least from outside of town, which is amazing. And what I did basically is, like, in some locations I brought the train lines above ground, which needed some significant changes to my layout of the city and the roads, and also building some bridges in town. But in general, the purpose is for me to keep my train layout more understandable from what I'm doing. I have here 2 dead ends at the moment that I'm not really utilizing for now, but I will hopefully be able to change that in the near future. And I also changed a couple more things regarding the road layout, and I built like a new small district around this train station. It's like a suburban thing, as you could see it probably somewhere in Japan. Little commercial business district here, and then from there residential zones, high-rise and low-rise, and some amenities like schools and such are to be seen there. From a traffic perspective, I assume I should be doing better, but that's the last thing I'm going to check. But I promise I'm only going to check it because it's 83%. It's still at a level that's kind of acceptable here. I'm sure I could change a couple of things from like a road layout perspective over there, And I also need to make sure that my whole collector roads are not subdivided that often as they currently are. I'm trying already to make use of this concept here in those districts, but for the main part of my city it's honestly quite challenging. So yeah, here we are, and I'm curious what the future brings here to Cities Skylines in Springvalley. So hopefully I can keep this whole series for you interesting, and now I think it's time for me to head over to the voiceovers. But before I'm doing that, and before I'm stopping the gameplay here, I would like to thank you again for joining me today. I always appreciate you as my visitors to my channel here. If you would leave me a like, leave me a comment, and maybe follow my channel if you wanna keep up with the content that I'll be publishing in the future. And yeah, I hope to see you soon back, and if you liked it, maybe you wanna consider subscribing to my channel. So thank you very much again, and have a good day, have a good time, and hope to see you soon. Thanks a lot, bye bye.